Hey there, and welcome back to ClearPath Conversations. I'm Mark Bernardin. In the last episode, we talked about handling burnout in customer success. We covered the hidden toll of emotional labor, how to reorganize when you're running on fumes, and practical strategies for protecting your energy without abandoning your customers. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, you just can't take care of anyone else. Now, today we're shifting gears to talk about something that will test your resilience in a different way. We're talking about stakeholder mapping when everything changes, when your champion leaves, when the org restructures, when the new VP comes in with their own ideas about vendors, when the person who fought for your renewal is suddenly gone and you're starting from zero with someone who's never heard of you. Because here's the truth that no one tells you in CSM boot camp. Relationships are not static. People change roles. Companies reorganize. Champions get promoted, they get fired, or poached away by competitors. And when that happens, all the goodwill that you've built can evaporate overnight if you haven't prepared for it. So in this episode, we're talking about stakeholder mapping when everyone changes. Not the beginner version where you make a nice org chart with names and titles. We're talking about the advanced playbook for navigating turnover, for navigating reorgs and shifting power structures. Because if you're relying on one person to protect your renewal, you're not managing relationships. You're gambling. Let me tell you about a situation that I inherited that changed really how I think about relationship architecture. Early in my time at Palo Alto Networks, I took over a huge retail account from a CSM who moved on to another role. On paper, everything looked solid. Multi-million-dollar contract, good usage numbers. Renewal was still 8-9 months out. The handoff notes said that the relationship was really strong. 3 weeks into managing the account, their VP of security architecture left the company. Took a job at a competitor. 2 weeks notice. Gone. The account went from green to red overnight. Here's what I discovered when I started my digging. The previous CSM had built the entire relationship around that one person. There were notes about the VP, lots and lots of notes, but almost nothing about anyone else in the org. No documentation of decision-making structure, no map of who controlled budget or who had veto power, no relationships with compliance, with finance, or really the broader security organization. When the VP left, we had no advocates. The new leadership came from outside the company. They had their own vendor preferences, and they made it very clear that they were reviewing all existing contracts. I had 90 days to rebuild a relationship that should have been diversified from the very beginning. I scheduled stakeholder meetings across the organization, compliance, risk, IT operations, business unit leaders. I presented to people who'd never been in a room with us before. I documented value in ways that could survive personnel changes. I identified who actually made decisions versus who was just in the room. We saved the renewal and expanded the contract by 32%. But it reinforced something that I'd already learned years ago at Cofense. If your relationship strategy has a single point of failure, it's not a strategy, it's a vulnerability. And from that point forward, I built relationship redundancy into every account that I managed. At Palo Alto Networks, I trained the 7 CSMs that I mentored on this framework. At Swimlane and Deepwatch, I made it standard practice for high-value accounts because protecting millions in ARR means preparing for change before it happens. So let's talk about what actually works when everyone changes. Stakeholder mapping is not a one-time exercise. It's an ongoing discipline. Organizations are living systems. People move. Priorities shift. Power structures evolve. If you're not tracking those changes in real time, you're always one step behind. Most CSMs think they're doing stakeholder mapping because they have a list of contacts in their CRM, names, titles, email addresses, who to invite to the EBR. That's not enough, because stakeholder mapping is not about who people are. It's about how decisions get made. Who has influence? Who controls the budget? Who can block your initiatives? Who can champion them? And who's vulnerable to change? Here's the framework that I use. The influence and continuity map. 3 questions. Question 1, who actually makes the decisions? Not who's supposed to make decisions according to the org chart. Who actually makes them? Because title and authority are not the same thing. I once worked with a customer where the VP of IT was technically the decision maker for all technology purchases. But in practice, nothing moved without buy-in from the director of compliance. She didn't have budget authority, but she had veto power. And if you didn't understand that, you'd waste months selling to the wrong person. So you need to map the real decision-making structure. Who controls the budget? Who has veto power? Who needs to sign off? And who's just there for the information? You figure this out by watching how decisions actually get made. Who asks the final question in the meeting? Who gets pulled into conversations at the last minute? Whose opinion changes the room? And that's your real power map. Question number 2 is, who's vulnerable to change? Every stakeholder has a different level of organizational stability. Some people have been there for 10 years and they're not going anywhere. Some people just started out and might not make it past their first year. Some people are on the fast track and are going to be promoted out of their current role in 6 months. You need to track this, not in a creepy way, but in a strategic way, because if your entire relationship is built on someone who's 2 months from retiring or 3 months from being promoted, you need to know that. You need to be building redundancy before they're gone. And I just track this in a simple spreadsheet. Name, title, tenure, relationship strength, and vulnerability rating. High, medium, low. High means they're likely to change roles in the next 6 months. Medium means within about a year. Low means that they're pretty stable. And here's the key. Your highest risk relationships are not your weakest relationships. They're your strongest relationships with high vulnerability. Because when your champion leaves and you haven't built backup relationships, you're in trouble. The third question is, who can provide continuity if someone leaves? Now, this is where most CSMs fail. They build deep relationships with one, maybe two people. And when those people leave, they have no one else to fall back on. You need stakeholder redundancy. That means building relationships across multiple levels and multiple departments, and not surface level relationships, real relationships where people know what you do, why it matters, and how it connects to their goals. Now, I aim for 3 to 5 key relationships per account, not 300, 3 to 5. Executive sponsor, technical owner, compliance or security lead, maybe a business unit leader. And here's the critical part. These relationships can't all be with people who report to each other, because if the VP leaves and takes their whole team with them, you're back at square one. You need horizontal relationships across departments and across business units, so that when one part of the organization changes, you've still got people who can vouch for you in other parts. Let me give you a real example from my time at Palo Alto Networks. I was managing a large retail customer with almost 1.5 million in ARR. The champion was the director of security architecture. Great relationship. He was driving expansion conversations. Everything looked really solid. Then the company went through restructuring. Security architecture got folded into a new centralized security team reporting to a different executive altogether. Our champion lost his budget authority. The new executive came from outside the company with her own vendor preferences. We were suddenly fighting to stay in the evaluation. But I'd already built the relationship redundancy into this account as standard practice. Over the previous year, I'd worked with their compliance team on audit documentation. I'd partnered with their IT operations team on integration projects. I'd presented to their risk committee on threat intelligence strategy. I had documented value delivery across 3 different business units. So when the reorg happened, I had advocates in 3 parts of the organization. And when the new executive asked around about the platform, she heard positive feedback from people that she trusted, people who weren't part of the security organization, people whose opinions carried weight because they controlled their own budgets and evaluation criteria. We didn't just survive the reorg. We expanded the contract by $340,000. And this pattern repeated itself across my portfolio. I managed 17 reorgs during my time at Palo Alto Networks. 15 of those accounts renewed, and 12 of them expanded. The 2 that didn't renew had business reasons unrelated to the relationship architecture. That success rate came from treating relationship redundancy as a non-negotiable part of enterprise account management. That's the power of systematic relationship architecture. Now, let's talk about what to do when change actually happens. Step 1, you want to assess the impact right away. As soon as you hear about a departure or a reorg, understand what it means for your account. Don't wait for the dust to settle. Who left or who's leaving? What's their role in the decision making? Did they control budget or have veto power? Who's replacing them? Are they internal or external? Do they have existing vendor preferences? You need answers within 48 hours. I send a quick message to my internal champion. Hey, I saw the announcement about the reorg. Want to understand how this impacts our partnership. Can we sync up this week? No panic, just a signal that you're paying attention. Step 2 is map out the new power structure. Reorgs shuffle around influence, not just people. Budget authority moves. Decision-making processes change around. New stakeholders get pulled in. Old stakeholders get sidelined. You need to understand the new map and quickly. Who reports to whom now? Who controls the budget that was split across 3 departments? Who's responsible for vendor relationships that used to be managed by the business unit level? You can't figure this out from the org chart. You have to get in and ask. And you have to ask multiple people. I start with my closest contact and then work outward. Hey, help me understand the new structure. Who should I be talking to about renewals? Who's driving technology decisions now? Then I cross-reference with other stakeholders. The formal structure and the real structure are frequently different. Step 3 is to reestablish value quickly. New stakeholders do not care about your historical performance. They care about what you can do for them now. So you need to reprove your value quickly. This means translating your existing value into language that matters to the new decision maker. If they care about cost efficiency, show them cost efficiency. If they care about risk reduction, show risk reduction. If they care about consolidation, show how you fit into that strategy. I schedule an executive business review within 30 days of a major change. Not the standard cadence EBR, but a strategic reset. Current state, outcomes delivered, alignment with their new priorities. And I don't assume they know anything. I present it fresh because for them it is. And step 4 is build new relationships without abandoning old ones. Don't drop your old contacts when they lose decision-making power. They still have institutional knowledge. You still have relationships. They still have credibility. I stay in touch with former champions, not necessarily transactionally, but genuinely. Hey, how you doing? What are you focused on now? Sometimes they land in roles where they can help again. Sometimes they become informal advisors who tell you how to navigate the new structure. And sometimes they're just good people who appreciate that you didn't ghost them. That goodwill pays dividends that you just can't predict. Step 5 is document everything and update your stakeholder map. Update your stakeholder map immediately. Every role change, every new insight about decision-making structure, every vulnerability you identify, this is your institutional memory. 6 months from now, you won't remember how decisions got made during the reorg. You won't remember who had informal influence. But if you write it down, you'll have it. And if you ever leave the account or bring in a new CSM, they'll have it too. That's how you build continuity across team changes, not just customer changes. Now let's talk about prevention. The best way to handle stakeholder turnover is to prepare before it ever happens. And number 1, I diversify my champions. I never rely on just one person. I build relationships with at least 3 people who can advocate from different angles. Technical value, business value, compliance value, risk reduction value. This is the first principle that I taught the 7 CSMs that I mentored at Palo Alto. Number 2 is I involve multiple stakeholders in executive business reviews. Not just the executive sponsor, but the technical owner, the compliance lead, the business unit leader who's using our platform. The more people who see the value that we're delivering, the more people who can defend the relationship when someone new comes in who's asking questions. Number 3, I document value delivery in a way that's transferable. I create artifacts, executive summaries, ROI reports, case studies, documentation that can be handed to a new decision maker to immediately demonstrate what we've accomplished. When your champion leaves, the story has to live in documents that survive the transition. Number 4, I stay connected to the broader organization. I talk to people beyond platform users, finance, compliance, risk, operations, people who care about the outcomes that our platform drives. So when a reorg happens, I'm not an unknown vendor to half the company. Number 5 is I track organizational signals that predict change. LinkedIn profile updates, strategic review announcements, consolidation or vendor rationalization talk, leadership alignment discussions. The earlier you see change coming, the more time you have to prepare. Let me give you one more example that shows what this looks like when it's built into your standard practice. At Deepwatch, I was managing a portfolio that included a large manufacturing customer worth $847,000 in ARR. The champion was the vice president of IT. 7 years of tenure, stable, great relationship. But I was already tracking organizational vulnerability as part of my standard stakeholder mapping process. The company had just been acquired. The parent company was known for aggressive vendor consolidation and cost optimization. And I noticed the VP's name kept appearing in internal communications about leadership alignment and organizational streamlining. That wasn't a red flag yet, but it was a signal. So I executed the relationship redundancy playbook that I'd been using successfully across my portfolio. I scheduled a meeting with the CFO to present our cost efficiency metrics. I connected with the compliance team to document how we'd simplified their auditing process. I partnered with the business unit leaders to quantify operational impact. I presented to the risk committee on our threat intel capabilities. This wasn't reactive. This was systematic. I was building horizontal relationships across the organization because that's what protects enterprise contracts when leadership changes. About 6 months later, the VP was let go as part of the post-acquisition restructure. New IT leadership came from the parent company with their own vendor relationships. They launched a comprehensive contract review. But here's what happened. When they asked around about our platform, they heard from the CFO that we'd optimized their security spend by 18%. They heard from compliance that we'd reduced audit preparation time by 40 hours per quarter. They heard from operations that we'd cut incident response time by 37%. We didn't just survive the transition. We expanded the contract by $312,000. This outcome wasn't luck. It was the result of relationship architecture that I built specifically to withstand executive turnover. And this approach had already protected over $3.2 million in ARR across 11 reorgs in my portfolio at that point. That's the goal. Not to prevent change. You can't prevent change. But to build relationships that are resilient enough to survive it. And the results speak for themselves. Across my last 3 roles, this approach has protected over $8.5 million in ARR through 28 organizational transitions. That includes reorgs, leadership changes, mergers, and champion departures. 24 of those accounts renewed. 19 of them expanded. The 4 that didn't renew had legitimate business reasons like company closures or complete platform shifts unrelated to relationship health. That's not luck. That's systematic relationship architecture applied consistently across enterprise portfolios. So here's my challenge to you. Pull up your stakeholder map. If you don't have one, create one. List every key stakeholder for your most important accounts. If your primary champion left tomorrow, who would fight for this renewal? If the organization restructured and your contacts lost their budget authority, who would you call? If a new executive came in with vendor preferences from their last company, who could vouch for your value? If you can't answer those questions confidently, you've got work to do. Build the redundancy. Document the value. Diversify your advocates. Map the real power structure. And start now, because change doesn't wait. Now, if you want a template for all this, I've got one at clearpathcx.com. The influence and continuity map. It includes a stakeholder tracking spreadsheet, vulnerability rating system, and continuity planning guide. Now, in our next episode, we're talking about managing your CSM portfolio during a crisis. Security incidents, mergers, product outages that impact half your customers all at once. How to triage, communicate, and stabilize when the world's on fire. Because crises demand a different playbook. Until then, if you're managing an account where your primary champion just left, or you're seeing signs of organizational change, don't wait. Build your redundancy now. Identify 2 or 3 stakeholders who can advocate for your value. Schedule conversations. Document your outcomes in a transferable format. Map the real decision-making structure before it changes. Follow the show on your favorite platform. Visit clearpathcx.com to grab the influence and continuity map, as well as other resources, and connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/n/Mark Bernardin. If this episode helped you rethink how you approach stakeholder relationships, drop me a message. I read every one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work. And thank you for showing up and delivering every single day. I'll talk to you soon.